Hello, my name is Ron Groudon. I'm a member of Emmanuel Episcopal Church here in Cumberland, Maryland, and I'm also one of their docents, enjoying the privilege of conducting tours for people who visit our facility. The church is located in Cumberland, Maryland. It sits on a hill just to the west of downtown Cumberland, and has oftentimes been referred to as the church on the hill. You can see it from any direction, even at night, because we light the steeple at night. The church is constructed of native sandstone. Most of it was quarried right here on site and in other locations around the Cumberland area. The parish itself was founded on this site in 1803, long after the fort had deteriorated and was no longer useful. This particular facility was built in 1850. The sanctuary itself is of a Gothic design, and it includes several conceits, as they are called. For example, the church itself is situated heading due east, and the length of the church is 121 feet. Not 120, not 110, 121, because the architect, Mr. Wright Butler, Philadelphia, determined to honor the idea of 121st Psalm, I lift mine eyes into the hills. There are many other small and interesting features to the sanctuary itself, and that's where we spend a lot of time conducting tours for our guests, and we're happy to have you here. It also contains several marvelous pieces of art, most notably 3 huge and unique stained glass windows that were designed by Louis Comfort Tiffany at about the turn of the 20th century. Emmanuel Church was built on the site of a French and Indian War fort called Fort Cumberland that figured very prominently in the conducts of the French and Indian War here in America. Church is also located right next to the Masonic Temple, which is itself a grand structure. It was built about 1911, just to the south of the church sanctuary. Our parish hall, that sits actually between the church sanctuary and the Masonic Temple, was built in 1901. The campus of the church includes several other very impressive buildings, one of which is we refer to as Emmanuel Hall. Is actually the old Mulholland Mansion that was built in 1878 and is on the National Register, as is the church itself. In fact, the entire first 6 blocks of Washington Street here in Cumberland the buildings are on the National Register. The church maintains and has maintained since about 1850 Rose Hill Cemetery just to the west of us here, which contains about 44,000 people, and is considered to be one of the more prominent and interesting cemeteries in the Cumberland area. Another interesting tidbit about the fort at Fort Cumberland was that there was a building on the fort grounds that was used for the commander of the facility, and at one time that, of course, was Colonel George Washington. By the middle of the 19th century, that building, still intact, was actually moved off-site and a few miles away to be used as a rental facility for families. In the early 20th century, 1921 to be exact, that building was brought back close to the church and close to its original location in what we call Riverside Park, which is located at the confluence of the Potomac River and Wills Creek. The church has in its oral history a part in the Underground Railroad during the time leading up to the Civil War. Interestingly enough, when the fort was here, 100 years before that, the laborers dug trenches all over the hill for the use of the soldiers if they were to have to move quickly into the fort to survive an Indian or a French and Indian attack. Those trenches long outlasted the fort itself, and in fact became a hazard on the hill because animals were falling in them. They were 6 feet deep, to the point that the good citizens of Cumberland, by and large, filled them all up out of a matter of safety. But the actual trenches and tunnels underneath the church, built in 1850, are still here. They were maintained and really serve as our basement or our cellar to this day. It's a joint-use facility. You're going to see HVAC parts and ducting. You're going to see electrical wiring and so forth and so on. But you're also going to see trenches that were built in 1755 at the direction of General Braddock and under the supervision of a by then 24-year-old George Washington. The church being over 150 years old and built at a time where construction materials were difficult to find and quite expensive even then, the church is always in need of some kind of repair and upkeep, and we fortunately have good laborers and laymen who do this job for us. For example, our roofs are all slate, so the roof on the sanctuary is original to the sanctuary. The roof on the parish hall was built in the early 1900s, is also original, which makes them both fairly old. Fortunately enough, the people who built the parish hall back in 1900, 1901 were smart enough to lay in an extra supply of slate. So as we have to make repairs, we at least don't have to go out and find new slate. It still matches. Within the confines of Emmanuel Church, there's a small garden which we refer to as the Bishop's Garden, and it's actually dedicated to the memory of St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of all animals. It also contains a small columbarium into which several of our members through the years have been interred, and is this time of year just about to bloom full with roses. It's a lovely and quiet spot. Over the chancel within our sanctuary, there is an arch that is made of sandstone, and on which is inscribed a portion of Psalm 24. Who shall ascend unto the hills of the Lord? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart. Among the stained glass windows, there is one that was installed in the late 19th century. It was made by Henry Holliday. Henry Holliday was an Englishman. He was considered to be the European Tiffany. And interestingly, he imported into America any number of stained glass windows to be put in private homes. But by all research, he only imported 3 windows to be installed in churches. All 3 of those churches happen to be Episcopal. One is in Boston, Massachusetts. The other's in Philadelphia, and the third is in Cumberland, Maryland. It was the music program that first drew me to this church. I had spent a career in the United States Air Force, and when I returned here in the late 20th century, and looking for a church, this particular facility opened its arms to me, and I've been very grateful to be a member of it ever since. Shortly after I joined Emmanuel Parish, I was approached by our rector at the time, Bo Chapman, with the idea of studying more about the church and its history and then becoming a tour guide, a docent. Well, I did that, and under his tutelage and supervision, I started to learn an awful lot about this marvelous place. And since his passing, I have continued in that growth, and in fact have reached to the point where it occupies much of my life, and I'm proud of that. And I'd love to have the opportunity to show this facility off and share its history with all comers. We've talked thus far about the history of this church and the location being the site of Fort Cumberland and several churches, including this one built in 1850 in the Gothic pattern. But the question also should be addressed as what the church does today. We remain a very active congregation within the community. We have an attitude of inclusion. We welcome all comers, otherwise it might not have left me in here. And we're very socially active throughout the Western Maryland region. The church itself has acted as the mother church, if you will, for several other Episcopal churches that have been built over the last 100 or more years throughout Western Maryland, including towns in Garrett County, Allegheny County, Washington County, and into counties in West Virginia. Emmanuel Episcopal Church is located on a very historic site that goes back even to before the founding of our nation. And it has played a part in many epic eras within our nation. But as importantly, if not even more importantly, it remains a vibrant part of our local society, and hopefully will remain so well into the future.